doesn't want to participate in society. She does not want to be a functional member of the ecosystem of the SHIT show that's happening around us. So hello, welcome to the Hot Girl Book Club, where hot girls read books, because being educated is hot. So today we will be discussing My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh. Now, this book spoke to me on so many levels, and I think it's so relevant in today's socio-political climate, and it highlights the way we are socialized as women, as men, as individuals existing in these systems, in a very satirical and dark way. So let's get into it. First, I'm going to start off with a quote from Keva Akbar's Martyr, which maybe I will possibly be doing a review on. It says, "It's hard not to envy the monsters when you see how good they have it and how little they care about being monsters." And I think that quote really speaks to our protagonist and how we all envy her in some way, shape, or form. I'm going to do a chapter summary, and then I'm going to do my final thoughts at the end. There's 8 chapters, so the vibe of this book club is not doom and gloom. It is, what can we take from these literary works and how can we assemble them into a way to better live our lives, to be happier, healthier human beings, and to develop a better understanding of the world around us. So in chapter 1, we are introduced to our protagonist. She's a hot, blonde, tall, rich girly. She is a nepo baby, so to speak. Like, there's no better way to put it. She is a nepo baby. We're introduced to her sadomasochistic, as I would describe it, relationship with her best friend, Riva. Riva is your typical NYC girly. Like, she is here for the rat race. She is a corporate girly. She has every eating disorder under the sun, and she is like really into appearances, status, and all of those things. And then we're also introduced to a psychiatrist, which she found in the ad, Dr. Tuttle. Now, Dr. Tuttle is psychotic in like the best way. Like, this is what people think of when they think of psychiatrists. Like, they think psychiatry is just willy-nilly, like, let's get around insurance, let's prescribe every med under the sun until you say everything gets better. So yeah, we love Dr. Tuttle personally over here. When she does her first appointment, Dr. Tuttle asks if they would be a good fit by asking the following question: are you working for the police, FBI, CIA, DEA, FDA, NICB, NHCAA, or NASA? To which our protagonist, who by the way doesn't have a name, says no. We're also introduced to our writer's obsession, like OCD compulsion, for Whoopi Goldberg and VHS tapes. Now, VHS tapes are a very specific and intentional choice, and that's because T doesn't want to participate in society. She does not want to be a functional member of the ecosystem of the SHIT show that's happening around us. So VHS tapes are a way to escape that reality, and they're a way to say, no, I'm not really feeling it, you know? I'm just gonna pretend like nothing else exists except for Whoopi. We're introduced to her textbook Wall Street boyfriend. His name's Trevor. He's your classic white boy, you know? Secretly gay. They hinted at multiple times. He stops talking to her for 2 weeks after she makes a joke that he's gay. I found myself cackling throughout this book to myself. We're introduced to her nepo baby job at an art gallery where she makes nothing, no money, but she doesn't need money. She's got her inheritance. By the way, both of her parents are dead, and they died within the past year after she graduated art school at Columbia, which she got into after writing an essay about a fake artist that she made up. So she pulls an Amber Heard. She SHITs on a very disgustingly pretentious art exhibit, trying to get PETA involved, for taxidermied dogs with lasers coming out their eyes. And we're introduced to the very non-romantic, unloving, deeply hateful dynamic between her parents. A lot of people grew up with some sort of platonic parents. A lot of people in America specifically, platonic parenthood seems to be a theme. Her dad was a bit of an NPC father. He was just there. He existed. He slept on the couch. And he was a professor of something. In chapter 2, she got fired from her fake job, and she can now finally begin her what she calls truly productive, her deep sleep, her metamorphosis, she calls it. And she delves into some extremely bizarre dreams after taking about 10 different psychiatric prescriptions. She's got them planned though. She has them regimented, scheduled. I don't know how her liver is still functioning. Riva comes by here and there. Every time they turn something on the TV, Riva's commenting about how thin or flabby some of these arms are. Anyway, so we delve a little bit more into the coldness and disdain her mother truly felt towards her, but we do address her obsession for sleep, because that was the way her and her mother connected. She slept in bed with her mother, and she had 44 absences due to her and her mother snoozing the alarm. That was her like childhood memories. So we get into Riva's drinking habit. Everybody hated our protagonist for being rich and pretty, yada yada yada. She had no friends growing up, such a hard life. Riva befriended her because she was everything Riva was not, she essentially says. She hangs up a Polaroid picture of Riva to remind herself how much she hates her. Excuse me. She goes back to Dr. Tuttle every time she lies about having issues sleeping so that she can sleep more. And at this point we've told Dr. Tuttle about 5 times that our parents are dead, and she doesn't remember each time. She said, quote, "I was growing less and less detached to life. If I kept going, I thought I'd disappear completely and reappear in some new form. That was my hope. That was my dream." Now in chapter 3, we discover what the author calls a subliminal rebellion. What great verbiage there, where she would have blackout episodes and go participate in society on accident. She would awaken to ALL sex chat rooms, and at this point she was on Inframidral, which is apparently a crazy psychiatric medication. Her psychiatrist goes as far as to starting her on lithium and Seroquel, the first appointment, so that they could get past insurance questions. She delves into her relationship with Trevor and how it is a vain obsession, a validation seeking thing, if you will, although all throughout the book she does not stop with contacting him. In chapter 4, Riva's mom dies, and she promises Riva that she's going to go to the funeral knowing that she does not care or does not want to go. I honestly think she's the worst friend anybody could ever ask for. But again, Riva does play a part in this friendship. It's more of a caretaker relationship at this point, but Riva needs someone who can stand to be around her. So she goes to our protagonist's house, who doesn't have the motivation to stop her. She goes to Riva's mom's funeral after waking up on the train after having a blackout episode and getting off the train, and Riva's there and she completely forgot she was actually gonna go. So Riva picks her up. They go to her, what our protagonist would describe as humble home, and she essentially goes more into her very concerning bulimic tendencies. And while she's at Riva's house laying down on her childhood bed, she recounts the death of her own father, where she reached for his hand and asked him to give her a sign from up above after he passed, and he very quickly jerked it away and asked for his wife, who then comes in and asks him if he has any last words. And after he died and the beeping on the EKG stops, she goes, "That's it, right?" So that would be, yeah, her mother and father's marriage right there. She describes Reva's funeral speech as Hallmark Cardi. She absolutely despises the way Reva has emotions and expresses them in a healthy way, because our protagonist grew up with nothing but coldness in their childhood. And it seems that Reva, it seems that she cries when she's sad, and our protagonist absolutely disdains this expression of emotion. It makes her sick. They leave the funeral to go watch a movie at her apartment on New Year's Eve to find pornography on her TV, which she describes as a beautiful circle of life. In chapter 5, we wake up to our protagonist having multiple Polaroid pictures from a crazy night out, it sounds, with the taxidermy dog artist Ping Z. She recounts her time in art school, where she hates the men in the art field. She describes a time where she was humiliated in art class because her teacher made her stand up front and do a Barbie pose because she came in late, and the men in her class described her as being, quote, broken by the male gaze because she had high heels on and she was skinny and pretty and blonde. At this point, she's having trouble sleeping because of the inframitral. Nothing else seems to be working. Her brain is hijacked. So she decides she's going to call up Trevor, and tell him that she's HIV positive. Doesn't answer. Tell him that she's gonna kill herself. He does not answer. Tells him she's gonna cut her boobs off. Finally, he responds after she asks for financial advice. Then her friend Reva comes over and discusses how she got a promotion at work because her boss does not want to see her anymore. She's promoted to work at the Twin Towers. And her boss is also married, and Reva is having an affair with him casually on the way out the door. One second. She says, quote, and I think I might just keep it to spite him. So we can gather that Reva is pregnant from this affair with her married boss. In chapter 6, her lawyer keeps prompting her to sell the house, and she's becoming increasingly sentimental about the house despite her seemingly dense relationship with her parents. She really does not want to let go of this past version of herself. She receives flowers from Ping Z, the taxidermy artist, and at this point she's taking copious amounts of Ambien, Haldol. She tells this psychotic psychiatrist that she killed her parents, and the psychiatrist was like, how? She was like, oh, I mixed oxy with this, and the psychiatrist goes, oh, that'll do it. Her psychiatrist also mentions that she has started doing mystical recalibrations through massage therapy. Cup massage therapy, I believe, was what it was. And then she attempts to get Reva to take some inframitral to see if she will black out like she did. Thank goodness Reva was smart enough to not take any. What a great friend for wanting to use her friend as a science experiment. She then awakens after another blackout to all of her pills being gone, with a note left by Reva stating, here's the beginning of your new life. She then breaks into Reva's apartment because she has a spare key, finds her pills in Reva's purse in the bathroom, and accidentally locks herself in Reva's bathroom, which only locks from the outside. Now this prompts the beginning of the end, when she realizes she can lock herself in places. So in chapter 7, after giving her entire wardrobe to Reva and therefore feeling exonerated from her friendship, now she can begin her rebirth, her metamorphosis, because she has gotten rid of all the material possessions that have been dragging her down. She even got rid of all of her furniture. So she contacts the only person self-serving and crazy enough to agree to lock her in her apartment for 40 days. Ping Z, the artist, under the guise that she will be his muse. She will be the art that he can create. So he comes every 3 days, delivers a pizza once a week, and she takes multivitamins. I don't know how her liver is still functioning at this point. I would describe this experience as those people who go into those black caves for like 5 days, a dopamine detox, if you will, and they come out and they see colors for the first time in I don't know how many hours, and like everything's so beautiful to them. I would describe this sleep project as something similar to that, a first world problem, if you will. So after swallowing her last pill, she has an experience I would describe as something similar to someone on LSD or DMT. She cries. She has her beautiful rebirth. So she wakes up, goes outside, passes out from the stimulation, and she begins to appreciate things. She even appreciates her relationship with Riva, who she describes as beautiful with all her nerves and all her complicated circuitous feelings and contradictions and fears. Pengzi made the artwork. She went to go see it. She hated it. It had nothing to do with her situation or how she envisioned it. It was more about an Asian American perspective. He painted her with kimonos on and dubbed over videos of her telling her most traumatic events with a voice memo of his mother cursing at him in Cantonese. She finally sold her house. And then in chapter 8, 9/11 happens. Riva dies because that's where she went to go work. And she saw a woman jumping off of the tower, and it was a coming of earth moment to her where she realized she could exercise. Diving into the unknown while awake, essentially. So my thoughts. I loved this piece. I want to discuss first the reason she chose a rich blonde white woman as our protagonist. Why would she do such a thing? Who cares what you're going through? You have it all. And I think it's because these layers of intersectionality that would otherwise distract us from what's going on, and it's that we don't feel like participating anymore. We don't see the point anymore, versus a character with more nuance, a character who would have more reasons to hate the world we live in, would distract us from the fact that regardless, it's tiring. We're tired, we're fed up, and I feel like we can all relate to that. And so I think what we can take as a positive message from this book is that we can appreciate life while still being tired and being fed up with it. And it's okay to acknowledge the fact that you're tired and fed up with the quote-unquote rat race. And I feel like taking a satirical look at Riva, who has an eating disorder and is always constantly analyzing and trying to fit in and trying to seek status, and when we take a satirical look and we look at ourselves and see how silly we are to someone who already has it all, then we can say, oh my gosh, look how silly I am. We can make fun of ourselves. We can see the humor in our existence. And I think that's what makes this book beautiful, is the humor in our existence. And the humor with which it's written, I think really drives it. There's no plot, but I had no issue finishing it in one day. And I want to say again, the vibe here is not doom and gloom. Like, we're going to take a lesson from every piece of literature and we're going to use it to better our lives. And from this piece of literature, we can take on the perspective of someone who has it all and realize how silly some of the day-to-day things we worry about truly are. And I think that brings a sense of peace. And I think it brings a sense of community, of at ourselves as women, and what we value and what kind of a waste of time some of it is, kind of what we could be focusing our energy on and what we should be focusing on our energy on, which is self-actualization, which is what this writer is privileged enough to do, which is what this protagonist is privileged enough to do. So I think we should all carry ourselves in a way that addresses what we would do, how we would conduct ourselves if we had every material possession we could ever desire. Thank you. So please join me next time. I will be discussing Careless People by Sarah Wynne Williams, A Cautionary Tale of Power, Greed, and Lost Idealism. Thank you so much for coming to the Hot Girl Book Club. See you next time. Bye.